Song of Ice and Fire podcast. I am Sir Matt, the Bud Knight.
And I am Ser Ezra, the Watchful. We are back with a kind of a, I guess, an overview, a look back in history, in the Westerosi history at Daemon Targaryen, Sir Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. We received this kind of from one of our listeners here. He said, from Sir Matthew Perry, he said, "Hey guys, wondering if you and Ez would be interested in doing a YouTube or Patreon episode about Daemon Targaryen from the Dance of Dragons. I loved reading about him in Fire and Blood. Such a boss. He also wrote Vhagar was in an intense battle with Aemond One Eye just above the God's Eye. I just read a passage in Fire and Blood. Vhagar also died and sank to the bottom of the lake, which is crazy. And they found Aemon attached to the dragon with Dark Sister plunged in his eye. Daemon wielded Dark Sister, no slouch. They also said that Daemon Targaryen's body was never found. So
Yeah.
just hope you guys could touch on him a little bit. Yeah, and as what's going to be most exciting here with Daemon Targaryen is that he's probably going to be the star of the upcoming Game of Thrones prequel that's centered around the Dance of Dragons. I mean, he is one of, if not probably the most important player in the Dance of Dragons. I mean, it's really those two kind of the two queens, right? And the princess and the queen that are like the kind of driving forces. But then when you get to the actual battling and everything, I mean, he is
That's right.
huge piece of that puzzle.
Yeah, he would definitely be a central figure. He's that Rouge Prince. He's this guy who is brother to a king, and whether he's just so connected to kings and queens, princesses, princes. He's fascinating actually, and he's very dynamic. There's a lot you can do with this character in the show. So
yeah, absolutely. So just this may be a couple part episode. We're gonna kind of see as we go here. But so early life. So he is born around 81 AC, which is of course about 120 years before the main Game of Thrones series. He's the second son of Prince Baelon Targaryen. His sister wife, Prince Alyssa Targaryen. It was during the reign of King Jaehaerys the First. Now Jaehaerys the First is the king that everybody refers to as probably the best king ever. He is king for a very, very long time, so much in fact that in of our source material here, you've got the mentions in the main series, and then you've got the big book, which I have here, the the big World of Ice and Fire book, and then also there is Fire and Blood, which Ez has right there. So that's where we get a lot of this stuff. There's also some novellas, but I think they're combined into Fire and Blood. So Jaehaerys the First is king. This is when he is born. Now, as Jaehaerys the First actually kind of sets up a precedent that causes some of the issues that we'll have going throughout Daemon's life.
Yeah, so I want to talk just a little bit about. I think it's referred to as like the Great Council of 101 AC, which is where King Jaehaerys, the old king, who's been around, as Sir Matt said, for a long time, actually outlived his heirs. So he had his two sons. His second son, Baelon, avenges the death of his elder brother and comes back. And when he comes back, he's named to Dragonstone, right? So that's if you are given the seat of Dragonstone, essentially you're next in line type of thing. And what's interesting is there was some who were upset that Baelon himself was named versus like his elder brother's daughter or even his daughter's son, potential son, right? Like she was pregnant at the time. So he sets this precedent that like, no, the succession is going to go to the next son. Okay. So his first son dies. So now Baelon is going to be next up. Well, the old king lives to be so old that he outlives Baelon. Baelon Targaryen, his second son, gets a stitch in his side and gets sick and dies. And so now you go back to, so do we now go to Balon Targaryen's son, or do I go back to my elder son's, grandson? It gets super confusing, or his daughter, which is Rhaenys Targaryen. So that he has this big kind of decision to make, and ultimately Balon Targaryen, which will be his, which is King Jaehaerys' second son, he names his son Viserys to be next up. So it's sort of this. It's a little confusing, and I wanted to bring it up because it's the succession that, like, this type of precedent that is set, that is going to cause problems later on for the Targaryens. Like, when it's not clear as to who should take the Iron Throne, that's where we get into some trouble, you know? So,
Absolutely. And it's, and real quick, just on that, not to jump too far off topic or anything, but it might be an issue that we see in Winds of Winter, actually, right? Because you think about, in the show, they never touched on the Great Council. It didn't it was never really mentioned, but
right.
in the books, I mean, if Cersei tries to become queen, or even possibly
Exactly.
Daenerys, that could pose an issue, because there's, characters like young Griff out there. So just, that's kind of just something to kind of keep in mind. Maybe that's a rabbit hole we can dive down in another video, but
Right.
just, it is something to think about. It is set up here from this great council where they, say women can't rule.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's the big sort of setup before we get into Daemon Targaryen. You need to understand that he is brother to Viserys, who Viserys the First is basically was chosen by King Jaehaerys, the old king, to succeed, and that's sort of what makes Daemon even relevant. Had they have gone the other way, I mean, really, either way you went, like, people are going to be upset. It's vying for power, so. But to understand Daemon Targaryen, he is brother to Viserys, who is named the successor after the old king. So,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so, and then Viserys and Daemon, their relationship, it's pretty back and forth, right? A lot of it has to do with the marriages that Daemon wants to partake in.
right.
One of his marriages later, is in secret, right? And so, so that's kind of that issue there, going back and forth between Viserys and Daemon. So in kind of the earlier reign of Viserys, Daemon is he is appointed commander of the city's watch, right? That's a
Mm-hmm.
position he kind of moves up the ranks, right?
Yep.
He's commander of the city's watch. It says, he gains a lot of the loyalty of the men of the city's watch, and he improves their armaments, he improves their equipment, he gives every man a gold cloak, right? And this is what actually lets them, this is where actually the name gold cloaks come
Yep.
from. Crime falls sharply under Daemon's command, likely due to his love of inflicting harsh punishments
Mm.
on thieves and the people he has captured. This is where he starts to get sort of a dark reputation in stews and brothels. He becomes acquainted with a prostitute named Massaria, who serves as his mistress of whisperers in the streets of Flea Bottom. So
Yeah.
he's starting to build and rally his own kind of support inside of the city, right? People joke and
Yeah.
call him Lord Flea Bottom. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah,
yeah, go
just
ahead.
real quick. I mean, like, an interesting thing about this whole piece to him being the commander of the city watch of King's Landing is that before that, right? He actually had a seat on the small council, but I think he was master of coin and master of laws, but he didn't do very well in those positions. He didn't really like it. It kind of bored him, and a lot of times, I think one of the things that's a little bit of a divide between him and his brother, Viserys has Otto Hightower as his hand of the king. Why not have your brother be hand of the king, right? Was there is there a reason for that? Is it what's the deal? I mean, he's still next up, but regardless, I don't think he would have liked that either, because really he just wants to rule, and he's more of a military type of guy. So being in the city watch was great for him, and he does amass some power. He's got like what 2 or 3 thousand city watch guard
Right.
members under this sort of like a small little force inside the city that he can use. So he and Otto Hightower, the hand of the king, actually have a little bit of strife between them, and Viserys tends to just kind of ignore it for the most part until I mean, every once in a while he kind of steps in here. So as you said, Daemon's lover becomes kind of an issue because Daemon's supposed to be in the Vale with his wife or have his wife from the Vale in King's Landing, and he doesn't. He doesn't really like this marriage that he's in. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a lot of his relationships do not go the way that Viserys wants. And again, as we said, that is kind of their big their big issue. So continuing on just a little bit here. Yeah, Daemon considers himself his brother's heir, right? As Viserys at that time had no living son, so he's thinking he's next in line, and he wants that title of Prince of Dragonstone, which his brother refuses to grant, right? And you talked about a little bit that there with Otto Hightower. Equally did not want Daemon to follow Viserys, and they proposed the idea that Viserys' daughter Rhaenyra should be named heir, right? And then he, of course, Viserys doesn't really go along with this because that doesn't work with the issue. But that is something we see throughout, is people say she should be the heir, and that certainly causes some issues, right? And then, as you said, Amira Aaron, right, Viserys' first wife, right, she dies, birthing Prince Balon Targaryen, right?
mhm.
So he gets a little son, or he gets a son, but the dies early in the cradle.
Yeah,
Says Daemon was observed in a brothel, right? And making jokes about that baby being heir for a day, right?
yeah,
So that
that's upsetting.
news kind of gets back. It doesn't go
Yep,
well. Daemon leaves the capital in a fury, right? But then on Dragonstone, Daemon impregnates his lover, Mysaria, and he wants to present her with a dragon egg. And the angry King Viserys demanded that Daemon return the egg, and that he return to Rhae in the Vale. Right? He sends his lover to Lys, but it ends up sailing through a storm, and they lose the child, and this causes some more friction between the two, and this will be an issue going forward throughout several of his kind of relationships.
yeah. So it's, I mean, again, these are two brothers, Viserys and Daemon, and they don't always get along. I think Daemon feels like his brother should trust him with more things, and that he should have been, even if it's a placeholder. I think Daemon believes that he should have been Prince of Dragonstone, and the fact that he wasn't set there, and that he didn't name Viserys didn't name anyone to that seat because he is hoping to have a son. We have Rhaenyra, who's awesome, and everyone really likes her. That's his daughter, Viserys' daughter. But he's waiting. Okay, if I have a son, then my son is going to be Prince of Dragonstone. But what he doesn't do on the in between is to go ahead and name his brother to that position just as a filler. Have the conversation like, you're going to sit there until I have a son, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. You're a placeholder, and also Daemon knows that, right? He should know that he's a second son, and so but yeah, it just caused a little bit of strife because I think I don't think Viserys includes him maybe as much as Daemon wanted to be included. And then he's a little upset with his behavior in that he does not go back to Rhea in the Vale, his actual wife. It doesn't actually go to the Vale or bring her to King's Landing. Instead, he has a mistress and then wants to give that mistress, a dragon egg. And Viserys intervenes and says, nope, she's out of here, and she has to go across the narrow sea, and they lose their child. So now he's upset, but so that starts to be some of that early tension between these two. Although they go back and forth, like they reconcile. I mean, they go back and forth because Daemon originally is a huge advocate of his brother becoming king. So when the old king was sort of trying to figure out who should ascend to the Iron Throne, Daemon's got his back. Why? Because that puts him that much closer. And then once he's there, it's like, well, it's not really going, I guess, the way he foresaw or the way that he wants it to go. So he's an ambitious guy. We'll put
Yeah.
it like that. So
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, their relationship, it's going to go back and forth because he thinks, hey, I vouched for you, you should then kind of return the favor and let me step in after you, and that's not the way it goes. But I think that's a kind of a good stopping part here for part one. Next time we're going to talk about actually their relationship getting repaired, right, with the conquering of the stepstones. So be sure to stay tuned for that. Thank you guys for watching. If you like it, hit that subscribe button, and remember that winter is coming.